répétition a une vertu pédagogique. J'espère que ce que je vais dire revêtira ce manteau de la vertu pédagogique et apportera un petit plus à tout ce qui a été dit. Mais c'est tellement difficile, parce que ceux qui nous ont précédés ont couvert presque tous les champs. Ils ont seulement laissé de côté, et à fort, peut-être une très bonne raison pour cela, le nez de la guerre, c'est quand même les finances. Nous avons entendu hier, particulièrement hier, l'intervention de la finance dans le financement des start-up et comment aider les jeunes entrepreneurs ou des penseurs qui ont une idée comment la mettre sur le marché. Et c'est très important. Alors, je vais essayer de faire ma présentation pour essayer, pour vous donner quelques points de vue et, j'allais dire, pour faire un tableau d'ensemble de la problématique du financement de l'innovation en Afrique. Pour cela, vous me permettrez, puisque mon document est en anglais, de m'aventurer à parler l'anglais pour que le modérateur puisse mieux comprendre ce que je veux dire. Economic history has taught us that, among other things, economic growth relies on productivity enhancement innovation. What is innovation? Many definitions has been given to this notion, but I will say, broadly speaking, it can be understood as application of better or improved solution to meet either new requirements or existing needs. It can take shape as low innovation, i.e. advancement in transitional sectors which raise productivity, help integrate industry and firms into higher value chain, and transformation economies by creating wealth. It can also be seen, as a matter of fact, very often seen as high innovation, that is breakthrough in technology and capital-intensive sector. In the context of Africa, whether in the low or high innovation streams, firms face many obstacles when it comes to gathering the financing of innovation. In general, there are several reasons to this, which for instance include low expected returns stemming from the inability to capture profit from an innovation firms across the continent, across the world even. The African problems is more acute. Inadequate structure of financial markets, scarce public financing, lack of track records of the firms, absence of venture capital firms, shallow equity markets, and so forth. And to add to that, the banking sector is not offering products which really meet the need of financing innovation. The lending of the banks concentrated mostly in a given sector, but definitely not in the very new ventures. After this introduction, my presentation will be structured as follows. Landscaping issue on financing innovation, engineering in financial markets to support innovation, innovative non-traditional financing option, and angel and patterns in creating seed stage and capital ecosystem. Those themes I will brush quickly over will be discussed at large at the different workshops are programmed for today. But let me say a few words on each item. Landscaping issue in financing innovation. The theory highlights the need for finance-friendly regulatory framework. Financing high innovation firms become difficult to the extent that the nature of the financing is subject to an important market failure because knowledge, which is the base of it, is easily duplicable, or as a matter of fact, rapidly duplicated. The implication being that investment in a technological innovative firms may not be deemed appropriate enough to warrant the investment in the first place. Therefore, it is critically important that African countries endow themselves with strong regulatory frameworks which can guarantee a form of protection and thus the returns which are commensurate with risk. Innovative investments are characterized by more than the usual risk encountered in financing SMEs. In order to consider financing options, it is important to understand the risk at stake. Beyond the typical credit risk one may face in front of an investment decision, there are additional ones in the case of innovative firms. First, research shows that over 50% of typical investment in an innovative firm is spent on salary and wages of scientists and engineers. This implies a key person risk to the extent that if such scientists or engineers leave the firm, the costs of replacement are often too high. This is particularly the case in startup companies. Another risk is that related to uncertainty of output. Contrary to an investment with known and used technology, the application of new techniques or the research leading to new ones embodies risk related to the success of the final output. While external finance is crucial, its provision may be expensive in the light of market failures, which are exacerbated by the risk related to output uncertainty. There generally tends to be a gap between external finance and internal financing. Such a gap can be explained by an asymmetry of information between the investor and the innovator, simply because the innovator has better information about the success of the project than the investor. An investor may have issue distinguishing the bad and good project. They will apply a conservative pricing across the board. Financing in innovative firms has a case for public intervention. Innovation per se has both public and private benefits. With regard to the private benefits, firms can get a return as they commercialize innovation. With regards to the public benefits, technological advances may get diffused at wide, and even in the case where innovations are not groundbreaking, successful firms not only contribute to the economy, but also have positive demonstration effect. Beyond the public aspect of innovation, the African market and the financial infrastructure are plagued by market failure, which call for some sort of government intervention. Ultimately, in financing innovation, there is a risk to be internalized. The question is, who will take that risk? The answer tends towards public institutions, such as development finance institutions. I would like to say, quickly, in terms of cutting short my presentation, by way of concluding, financing innovation requires public intervention. The presentation has highlighted the point that SMEs financing in Africa suffer from many market failure. The first takeaway is that there is a case for public intervention, be in the form of subsidy or regulation. Financing innovation requires leveraging on new initiatives, whether it is crowdfunding, business angel, or public-private partnership. Every new initiative that garners momentum should be carefully evaluated and leveraged. Financing innovation requires thinking along the financial chain. One should not focus only on seed capital, but make sure that the accompanying structure are built to carry the firms throughout growth stages of the firms. Seed capital is needed to kickstart. Venture capital is needed for growth. Exchange to take off. This cannot be seen in isolation from policy perspective. Financing innovation does not necessarily mean putting all resources in high-tech firms. Issues laid out in this presentation are valid for both low innovation and high innovation firms, with the low innovation firms accounting for the bulk of SMEs in our continent. Both are crucial in economic transformation. I will conclude simply saying that we should invite our captain of industries in this country, in Africa, to really give thought and help to the startup companies, to venture the resources to help for young creators, young inventors, to be able to put their ideas in form of a project, and that project to be supported at the beginning by either the family members, either the angel investors, but mostly the government has to support those efforts. With this, I will leave the floor and be ready to take up any question you wish me, you will kindly like to ask me to do. I thank you for your kind attention.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Ndiaye. I think one point that I caught was that you made towards the end that one must think of financing the entire life cycle of a venture, whereas even in my own introduction, I made the mistake of thinking only about the seed capital at the very beginning. But certainly firms grow, they expand, and there's a trajectory of financing, I think, that they need in order for them to be successful. And see, I think here's where, Peng, you can help us. You have started, you have sold on to very large firms. How did you finance that whole process from innovating something like Match.com onto selling it onto, or even doing some IPOs at NASDAQ? What was your trajectory? We'd really like to know. And I'm sure there are many young entrepreneurs here who would like to hear your story of successfully financing your own innovations. Welcome, Peng.
Aidan, I do apologize. My prepared comments actually won't cover much of my experiences, but we can do that in the Q&A. Yeah. So good morning, everyone. This is our first time in Cape Verde, and we've been blown away by the hospitality our hosts have shown us. So I'd like to thank them very much for that. I have two passions. One is in building tech companies, tech businesses, and the other one is education. Since this session is about financing, I will focus mainly on the former, but I'll loop back on education later because I think it's a very key issue. I was very puzzled when Dr. Adesida asked me to speak at this conference. I don't think anybody would mistake me for an expert in African economic development. Do I look like someone who knows much about African economic development? I don't think so, and I'm not. I'm also not an industrialist. I have never built factories. I've never shipped large amounts of commodities across oceans. And it's just a simple fact that I don't even know much about innovation in general. What I am, I'm a computer geek. I'm a computer geek who happened to build some businesses, and in the end, in this part of my career, I'm actually financing computer geeks building businesses. So it's a very focused area that I know well. But I also have spent some time working with the Singapore government. The last 10 plus years, I came back to Asia after about 18 years in the US and spent a lot of time helping the government there think about how to build tech ecosystems. And in fact, we did some work there, which I'll share with you briefly afterwards. So that's what I know, building tech businesses. And I think I know a little bit and enough to be dangerous in how to create tech ecosystems. And in this short talk, I'm going to cover two areas. One is how do you think about financing a tech ecosystem, a nascent tech ecosystem, and why you might care. So here's what I know about financing and financing infrastructure for tech ecosystems. First, you need talent. There's nothing to finance if there are no entrepreneurs. The nature of talent for the tech ecosystem is it's typically young and educated. Young, so they are not blinded by what the world thinks is not possible. And educated, so that they have the technical depth to do what they need to do to meet the challenges. And by the way, educated doesn't have to mean formal education, although that helps. I know a number of software developers who do not have formal computer science training, right? All they've done is they've taught themselves, they bought books, and now with the internet, it's going to be so much easier. People who have learned from mentors, other people who've done it before. Education can be very informal in this world now. With a certain concentration of talent and energy, the ecosystem starts to grow. However, before it does, life is extra hard for entrepreneurs. It is next to impossible to get VC financing, venture capital financing from outside your home market. Right? We've seen this in Singapore, when it was budding, and frankly, Singapore is still very early in its VC cycle of development. I've tried sending companies to, let's say, Silicon Valley to talk to the VCs there. And the response is always, you're too far away. We don't know your market, we don't know how to manage you, etc. So you should almost take it as an impossibility to get VC financing from VCs outside your markets. So trying to do a tech startup in a budding ecosystem or without a tech ecosystem is something I won't want to do myself, but unfortunately, it is unavoidable. There will be people on the frontier, right? If you look at a lot of the entrepreneurs in Singapore now, they're all on the bleeding edge, right? They're struggling through a budding ecosystem, and I'm sure my friends in Lagos and other places in Africa are experiencing very similar things. But I think, as the earlier speaker mentioned, there are things the governments can do. In Singapore, we learned a few tricks from the Israelis. One such trick, and by the way, you see the evidence of our activities, I think in the next few years when you see companies from Southeast Asia go public, right? There will be pretty significant companies. And this is a result of, I would say, maybe 10, 15 years of work. So it's also a very long-term endeavor. There's one mechanism that we use that was particularly useful in Singapore, which is what we call capital acceleration. If you invest $1 in a Silicon Valley startup, right, there's a high risk, but there's a chance that you can get significant returns. In a developing region, you might have to invest a lot more to get the same kind of returns with the same risk. So you might have to invest $2 or $3. So capital acceleration is the government stepping up to multiply the capital provided by the private sector. I think it's a bad idea for governments to be VCs, by the way. I think we should figure out how to encourage the VCs to invest by sort of risk equalizing the investments they're making, so that the chances of returns are, if not exactly the same, close to what they could get globally. Right? So this, I agree with the previous gentleman that it is absolutely essential if you want to grow a tech ecosystem fast to have the government involved. By the way, this is not necessarily a money or loss-making proposition for the governments either, because they're going to take either debt or equity in startups. So many will fail, but the one that succeeds could pay off 10 to 100 of these failures. So don't think of this as a loss-making proposition. So when Singapore rolled out its capital acceleration program, they called it TIS, Technology Innovation Scheme. There was a 6-to-1 matching factor for the seed investments. A lot of people thought that was too much, but it opened up a lot of eyes from all over the world. We attracted a lot of really strong entrepreneurs and investors that have experience building companies, and they're now in Singapore. They're helping build the ecosystem. We've had hiccups there, not easy to co-invest for the government to co-invest with the private sector. But if you look at the activity now versus 5-10 years ago, it's a huge difference. So some mechanisms do work. We've studied a lot more other ways to do things. If there's interest here, please feel free to reach out to me. I can point you to a lot of things we looked at and are working on. So the other question I have when I was writing this down is, why should you care? Right? Because if you look at where the GDP comes from in Africa, it's not high tech. Right? Well, let me give you some motivations here. In May last year, McKinsey published a study of more than 100 disruptive technologies. And the report concluded that if you took the top 6 most disruptive technologies, that's more than 90% of the economic impact they're going to have from the 100. And the total economic impact by 2025 is going to be between 12 to 28 trillion dollars, right? So that's, to put it differently, that's the biggest technology disruption in the history of humankind that's coming our way. And it's not that far away. The BCG also concluded that in the developing countries, one of the fastest growing sectors is going to be IT, 18% a year, and that's averaging around the world. So I suspect it's going to be a lot faster in Africa too. When talking to a few folks here about economic development stages, I noticed there's usually an assumption made that a developing economy has to go from resource-driven to capital-driven, and then finally to knowledge-driven. So from agriculture and resources to industrial to services and then to knowledge-based activities. It has always happened this way in the history of economic development, England, the US, China, Singapore, etc. But we don't know for sure that these development stages have to be sequential. When I was talking to Dr. Adisida earlier, he mentioned to me that the rest of the world always looked at the African economy and the development of the African economy as from the bottom of the pyramid, right? They always focus on the bottom of the pyramid. And he said that this conference is a way of saying Africa should also focus on value creation further up the economic stack. And I agree with him. Perhaps someone should ask the question, do we really need to toil over crops, pollute our air with factories, ask multinationals for investments before we build a knowledge-based economy? Perhaps one of Africa's next biggest innovation could be to demonstrate to the rest of the world that it's possible to develop the economy without passing through the industrial stage and go straight to a knowledge-based economy. This sounds like economic heresy, right, when I put it that way, but I guess that's what innovation is about. It's about asking the questions that people don't want to ask. Why do I think any focus in economy can take on the traditional U.S. businesses or Western, actually mainly U.S. businesses when it comes to tech? Let me give you one example. I was talking to the Bonaco guys outside there. They have an exhibit. They make free-to-play online games. I was showing them a list of top game makers in terms of income. And it turns out the top 3 games were Asian. Right? And in case you think they are small businesses, they're 1 billion. The first one is 1 billion, then 600 million and $400 million in revenues last year. And they are companies with very high profit margins. So it's not like 2%, 5% profit margins. It's closer to 50% profit margins. 7 of the top 10 are Asian companies. All this in an industry that barely existed 10 years ago. I think from a national perspective, the tech sector is very attractive. Small bets, small investments can be leveraged through fast business cycles. So you fail fast, you fail with a little bit of money, and it can result in large-scale impact across regional and global markets. I think all this is possible only if you have young, educated citizens and positive motivation in their hearts to build a better place for themselves and their society. But educating the next generation to bootstrap a society is not a new concept, especially not here. It's the cornerstone of Singapore's success, for example. And from the conversations I've had these past few days, there are many determined people that will make it a cornerstone of Africa's economic success. It says 5 minutes here. I've got one more paragraph. If you have this, an educated, motivated youth, then the creation of a financial system to fund startups and companies in that innovation ecosystem becomes almost a technical exercise. And there are other people who have done it before, so it's not that big of a mystery. I do trust that there'll be lots of conversations along this dimension soon, and I hope I can be part of it. Thank you very much.
Peng, you committed 2 heresies. Not just one economic heresy, 2. Thank you for a brilliant presentation, but here's the first one. That governments should be involved in venture capital? They should not be. You don't like it, but they did in Singapore. Sort of.
Sort of.
The 6-to-1 matching sounded very
They should be venture capitalists.
They should be venture capitalists.
They should not be venture capitalists.
Okay.
They should work with venture capitalists.
They should work with venture capitalists. It's still heretical. And the second one, which I really like, that Africa's massive, huge innovation could be to prove that you can go from extractive to knowledge without the mess of the industrial. Now that's an experiment that some countries are trying. I think Rwanda is one of them. And we'll see what the results are like. But I think we might have a different perspective from Dr. Paul, who I'd like to invite you up to give us your perspective on your experience in financing innovation at the agricultural level in the country of Cameroon and other parts of the continent. And you're going to have to solve that mystery of what it is that you're doing in China exactly. Dr. Paul, welcome.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. due to the time constraints, I think the presentation is already there. Due to the time constraints, I am obliged to do my presentation in French. Even the PowerPoint is in English. It is because I will be able more efficient to concentrate in a very few points. Really, my presentation is going to be in 4 key points. The current situation of innovation in Africa, obstacle to innovation in Africa, the challenge of financial innovation in Africa, and an innovative example. Let me talk immediately in French. Le problème le plus important dans l'innovation est qu'aujourd'hui, l'Afrique est considérée comme le continent de l'espoir. Jusque-là, c'était en fait le continent du désespoir. Cependant, nous connaissons une croissance significative. Mais d'où vient cette croissance? Cette croissance vient de l'exploitation de nos matières premières. Elle ne vient du tout pas de l'innovation. Et même cette exploitation de matières premières, elle aussi, dépend de la demande chinoise. Alors, en réalité, l'innovation doit être examinée un peu différemment pour dire quelle est la situation réelle de l'innovation. Est-ce que l'Afrique participe de façon significative à l'innovation ou l'Afrique est un peu en retard en ce qui concerne l'innovation? À mon avis, la situation actuelle de l'innovation en Afrique, comme vous pouvez voir sur la carte, l'Afrique est tout à fait en retard. Tout à fait en retard. Et ce retard montre en général que nous n'avons que 73 foyers de technologie à travers l'Afrique. 63 seulement incubateurs d'entreprises en Afrique. Ça, les statistiques sont celles de la Banque mondiale. En dehors de quelques exemples significatifs qu'on trouve, surtout au Kenya, en Afrique du Sud et un peu au Ghana, on peut dire que l'innovation reste encore très, très embryonnaire. Cette carte, elle, vous présente les innovations mesurées en termes d'habitants. Les États-Unis occupent le premier rang. Ensuite vient le Canada. Ensuite vient le Japon, la Suisse, Finlande, Israël, etc. Et encore, je voulais donner ce tableau juste pour vous dire que dans tout le cas, l'Afrique est absente. En ce qui concerne le nombre de brevets, bien entendu, encore une fois de plus, nous sommes toujours absents. En ce qui concerne le budget dédié à la recherche, la part de l'Afrique est très peu significative.
The share of Africa
la plupart des pays
is very
africains
insignificant. In fact,
très peu
to start
de
with,
budget à la
very
recherche.
few
Or,
African states earmark funds for R&D, and we know for sure that innovation is the output of research. If you don't have enough money
la recherche,
for research,
bien sûr,
well,
notre part
of course,
serait peu significative
our contribution will be insignificant in innovation.
Alors, pourquoi en réalité nous avons tant de problèmes?
In reality, why do we see so many problems in Africa?
Ne participe pas
Why is
significativement
Africa not participating
à la recherche, à
significantly
l'innovation?
in innovation?
Pourquoi les pays africains
Why
ne bénéficient pas
are the
suffisamment
African countries
de
not
l'innovation?
benefiting sufficiently from innovation? We do have a certain number of obstacles. The first one is that we depend highly on aid. We believe that it is foreign aid or aid in general which will help us will save us. Secondly is the lack of rigor. Thirdly, lack of communication, or very little communication. And the most important factor is the fear of failure. And to this we can also add the tyranny of emergency, of what is urgent, because in Africa everything seems to be urgent. We also face another important problem, which is absence of rigor. All these factors are very fundamental obstacles to innovation. I have to speed up because if I get into too many details, the facilitator will not allow that. So what do we mean by innovation to start with? We don't have to think too much, but just say that innovation is to add value to what doesn't exist or to what exists already. We just add some value to what exists already. Now this means that research should precede innovation in order to allow us to use what exists already and add some value to it.
Alors, désormais, on a l'impression de toujours dire le financement est tout spécialement lié à l'innovation.
That funding is linked to innovation.
Le financement, c'est il n'y a pas d'innovation parce qu'il n'y a pas de financement.
We tend to say that there is no innovation because there is no financing.
Il n'y a pas d'innovation.
That should not be the case. There is no financing because very little money is devoted to research. And the problem of research is a serious issue.
Dans l'innovation viendrait toujours et souvent s'il y a suffisamment de sous investis dans la recherche.
The problem of financing of innovation will be addressed if enough money is invested in research.
Alors, je crois également sincèrement que tout produit innovant trouvera toujours un moyen de financement. Mais
every
le problème de sur le financement,
product will find financing,
la communication.
but the problem is to find to agree on where we can find this financing. There is a problem of communication. We have to take this research towards those who have the money. We have a problem of innovation, the existence of a stock exchange, the existence of a system of communication, and the product should be presented positively. So all these are some basic obstacles to innovation.
Nous avons au niveau de African First Bank Group
in Afriland First Bank Group, we have worked on what we call agro-based cluster model. In fact, we met with a group of small planters who wanted to actually improve their production. And we explained to them how to use the model, which is MC2, which is a mathematical model using Einstein's model, which we have used. So, all this to say that if you use the skills or the competences of all the community, if you put them all together, there will be an exponential growth. And we've done this, used this model in the field of agriculture in order to obtain results. Let me move fast. I cannot get into too many details.
Je vais plus vite pour vous montrer. Il s'agit des petits producteurs
qui are looking at small holders who want to improve their output and find funding sources. In a normal situation,
c'était une autre formule. Nous avons
the formula was different. So we have developed a model which enables small holders
donner son produit à la grande industrie, de pouvoir
give their products or their outputs to major investors or major industries, and they create what we call Rural Development Microbank, which is their own bank, which ensures their funding. So in this example, everything is finalized, and the innovation that might take place, whether it is in planting or in harvesting, etc., will be funded together. I've shown you this example just to tell you.
J'ai montré cet exemple juste pour vous dire, à tout moment, nous pouvons, s'il y a une innovation,
if there is an innovation, we can always find domestic resources. We don't always have to go to look for resources outside to improve our conditions, because we can address our problems only if we find resources, endogenous resources. We find endogenous resources which will allow us to fast-track our own growth.
Alors, est-ce que ce résultat, nous l'avons fait dans le domaine de palmier à huile,
we've obtained these results in the field of palm oil,
de maïs,
in the field of maize,
et le même modèle, et ça fonctionne
and the
très
same
bien.
model has
On l'a
been
fait dans le
used
domaine
for both the
de
crops. We've also used this model.
J'ai perdu la tête. Si vous pouviez m'aider, je serais très heureux.
Well, I can't find the right words.
Voilà, dans le domaine de caoutchouc.
Well, in the field of rubber.
On l'a aussi fait. Ce qui veut dire en clair, il y a,
now this,
pour ce qui concerne le financement, il y a beaucoup, nous pouvons beaucoup plus, le financement de l'innovation, on peut beaucoup plus chercher les solutions internes que les solutions externes. Je ne veux pas dire, je ne prétends pas dire que les solutions externes ne sont
innovation. I'm not trying to say that exogenous funding sources are not good. We have investment funds, we have the venture capital fund, we have several other funds. In fact, there are some entrepreneurs who are looking for new ideas in our countries in order to move faster. What we're trying to say is that even if we don't find financing, with good ideas,
nous allons pouvoir financer notre innovation
will be in a position to finance our innovation, provided that we take that decision to finance our innovation. Once again, I'd like to say that in the case of innovation, what really matters is not the financing itself. What really matters is the project which is cost-effective, which can find a market outlet, a product that can be industrialized.
Bon, Je voulais vous montrer le.
Well, I wanted to simply show you
la profitabilité de ce projet, mais je sais que ce n'est pas beaucoup de temps.
The profitability of this project, but I don't have much time,
Je voudrais
unfortunately.
simplement conclure pour dire
I'll
que
simply conclude
de
by
tout ce que
saying
nous avons dit,
that from the
il y a lieu
foregoing,
d'affirmer que
we can
le déficit de financement en ce qui
safely
concerne
say
l'innovation
that there is actually no financial gap in terms of financing of innovation.
mais nous n'avons pas
Funds do
exploré
exist in Africa,
suffisamment
but we have not
les solutions endogènes.
explored
Nous devons commencer
endogenous
aujourd'hui
solutions
à
to our
explorer les
problems.
solutions
So today we
endogènes
have to
avant
start
de nous reporter
exploring
sur les
endogenous
solutions
solutions before we
exogènes.
turn
Et
towards
là, nous
exogenous
sommes sûrs
solutions.
que
And
l'essentiel
then we
de notre
can be
innovation
certain that
va
most of our
trouver
innovations
ensuite son financement.
will
Je vous remercie.
receive funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Merci, Dr. Paul.
Thank you,
I know
Dr.
I
Paul.
rushed you a little bit, but I think I got the essence of your argument. If I might, you're suggesting that innovation is adding value to something, right? And secondly, the challenge is not so much that there is no financing for innovation, but the challenge is financing for the research that generates that added value. Is that correct?
Exactly correct.
And then you had a model you showed us of how you can internally generate the resources to finance the research and the innovation that research might be able to elicit for the agricultural sector in which you're working.
Exactly.
Are you making a lot of money?
It's not a problem of making a lot of money, but it's a problem of the smallholder are making money. Yes, that what I present, and you have it in my paper, I prove that everyone is making money, and that's why I can say that let us say the wealth is equitably distributed.
Okay, but they're financing their own innovation and their own research, or at least a portion of it.
By sure, what is important there is that we give some support to them. We give some support to them, and we also receive from some donors some support because the system was very well organized.
Thank you. It's 10:15, and I think we have enough time to explore some of the ideas that have been presented to us by Dr. Ndiaye, by Peng, and by Dr. Fokam there. And I think I would just like to remind you, I'm seeing your hand there, Doctor. We'll take questions 3 at a time so that they are able to respond. I can see your hand as well. Any more? And these 3. So I have 3 in hand. Can I get you a second round? A number of innovative ideas have been put forth for us. You just talked about Dr. Fokam's idea. There's the really big paradigm shift that Peng offered to us, whether Africa can leapfrog the industrial stage and go straight to a knowledge-based economy. And there are some policy suggestions that Dr. Ndiaye was making in terms of the government's role in helping to finance, fund discovery and innovation. But I'd like to invite Dr. Wale, since I know who you are, to make your contribution or your intervention. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, I want to thank the speakers for very clear and, in my mind, illuminating talks. But I would like us to think about the financing of the whole ecosystem from ideas to markets, and to think seriously about how we go from blue sky research to real companies to real markets, and what is missing. So for most of our countries, we do not have research foundations or innovation funds. For any country that wants to develop, it has to invest at least 1%, and preferably more, in research that can be accessed by anybody on the basis of merit. In the absence of those funds, in my opinion, you don't create an effective environment for basic researchers to come up with new ideas that you need to drive the future. Now, above that, I think we need to think about a new paradigm of national innovation funds, which are different from basic research funds. So those innovation funds can be for innovators that have new ways of doing things, and they should not be reviewed by academics. They should be reviewed by people who do things in the world that are looking to promote innovation within a new paradigm. And then we have to realize that actually most of the economy comes from small businesses. So we need to have, if we think about it, right, real small business funds, not like the current ones that don't give anybody any money. What we really want are funds that have to be disbursed on people with good ideas, irrespective of the risk. In my mind, risk is good. And I think when people start worrying about failing here and failing here, you actually have to fail many times to succeed once. And so we shouldn't worry about the local statistics of failure. We should worry about the distribution of risk and net success. Now, if you go beyond small business funds, we have to realize actually that we need to have angels, we need to have various levels of capital intervention, and those funds are missing, and they have to come from within the system to drive the businesses from incubation to the point of profitability. In the absence of those funds, you cannot have an ecosystem that transitions from ideas to markets. So what I'd like our contributors to do will be to suggest in concrete ways how we as an African community can create the groups of people to drive the processes from basic research to small business funds to transition funds, from angels to venture capital. And what I really want are significant investments. For example, the African Development Bank can fund the creation of venture funds and angels that are managed by professionals to really intervene within our economies, and they can do so regionally. The governments, instead of just talking, can put aside certain percentage of taxation, or perhaps the big companies, you take 1% of those funds and you create these funds and you bring in the necessarily international advisors to manage those funds to disburse, irrespective of the quality of the contribution. So I'd like to really hear what can we do in concrete ways to finance the whole range from basic research to markets.
Thank you, Wale. There was this gentleman there. Yes, you're sir. And then I'll come to you. Yeah, go ahead, sir. Sorry, I'm going to have to stage manage. Sorry, it was that gentleman right there who it's impossible to see with the lights in your eyes. Right there. Stand. I think you better stand up, otherwise somebody's going to steal your mic. Yes. You go, sir.
Eric Tavares, Afrex Capital. Une question pour les docteurs Fokam et Ndiaye. Comment une institution financière privée peut accompagner à la fois des acteurs privés comme
stakeholders like Mr. Fokam or public institutions like the African Development Bank in financing innovation?
Mr. Peng, my question is, what is really what is comprised in what you call the knowledge-based economy? Is it only TIC? What we have in addition to those new technologies, what we can put in what you call the knowledge-based economy? Thank you.
And yes. Oh, I know. That's Julius.
Hello, my name is Julius Gatune from Africa Center of Economic Transformation in Ghana. My question is directed to Dr. Fokam. And really, I'm very intrigued about the model, because one of the biggest challenges you have in Africa is how do you make the smallholder and the processing industry work? Because on one hand, you have what you call the classic chicken and egg problem, because you need investors to invest, and you need the smallholders to invest in the right variety so that they can supply. But unless smallholder is guaranteed of market, they won't invest. And the industry, unless they are guaranteed of quality in terms of supply and consistency, they cannot also invest. And this is always hard to resolve. A lot of times you have found governments have tried to invest in smallholders, and the most experience is that when people get money from government, especially farmers, they have no obligation, they don't feel obliged to pay back. So usually agricultural finance corporations in most countries finally collapse. The other way that has been tried is the outgrower schemes. But the challenge of outgrower schemes, how do you enforce a contract between one agro-processing industry with 1,000 farmers when there are other markets they can sell to? I gave an example, for example, in Ghana we have seen, they tried to have a starch factory and cassava farmers to supply. But the cassava farmers decided to sell to the market. They don't follow the contract. So I'm intrigued by the other thing in Kenya we have seen is what we call cooperatives, where you have people come in and have a cooperative and then they work. But cooperative model has had problems because once it became too big, it becomes political. And in the end, farmers become dispossessed. So I'm curious about how your model has tried to solve those issues. In the sense that, how do you make that sure that you have the contract that can be enforced without the legal means? Because it's not possible to take 1,000 farmers to court.
Thank you. Thank you, Julius. So we have questions for all three here. Very specific. How do you fund or create a mechanism for funding from basic research all the way to the market? How do you pair up the private money with public money to finance innovation? And what exactly do you mean by the knowledge economy? And this perennial African problem for Dr. Fokam, how do you make sure that farmers honor their contract, or how do you get the investment from the private sector into the farming community? So let's start perhaps with you, yes, and then we'll come to Dr. Ndiaye, and then a very specific set of questions for you, Peng.
I would like to start to the question and put the example here in that everyone can see. I would like to start to the question. As you see, I didn't have enough time to explain, but now I have chance to give more explanation for the model. Have you seen? We have the model in front of you, and what is very important is to know that there is a tripartite contract between the big farmer, the smallholders, and the macro-rural bank, that when the macro-rural bank is giving money to the smallholders, the products, after you see the product, let us say when they pay back after selling the product, they pay the agrobus industry pay directly to the bank, that the bank have the possibility to reimburse the loan given to them. Now, another question was about how it works. How it works is very important. You know, we try to gather the small farmer into cooperatives, and the cooperative with them, they create their own bank, and this bank is owned by the whole population in this area. That means that even the distribution of the credit is given by themselves, and they know each other. We don't need collateral in that case because the system is closed, and they can really control, master all the system by themselves. And we don't need in this system that they can be literate or illiterate. It's not important. What is important is the information circulated in the area. Now, you were talking how to organize, the other question was about to organize the financing system, you know, and it was very important for us. In this case, we create what we call macro trust fund, is in our presentation. The macro trust fund is financing by donors, by the population themselves, by the state. It depends of, and this macro trust fund is oriented only for the macro structures that they can finance even some research. Again, what is important, we're talking about financing research. Yes, during my presentation, I explained that the key problem is to finance research. Because innovation is, for me, only the added value. We have to make a large spectrum of research before going to innovation. And this is a problem in Africa. Even though we have some structure, we have to control the problem of corruption, which is dominated in Africa. And this is a big problem. But this is not the platform to discuss about corruption. That question.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you.
As part of the challenge of creating a national innovation system. But to Dr. Waller's question, I'll give it to you, Dr. Diaye. You can come here if you wish.
You repeat it for me.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
I think, Waller, if I might summarize, how do you, in concrete terms, create this sort of national innovation funding mechanism that will allow a country, or let's say a country, an entity, to go from basic research, process of discovery, all the way through to companies and markets? So in concrete terms, from a policy perspective or even a financial perspective, how do you make sure that that chain is linked all the way from beginning to end?
Yep.
It's
okay? I can't answer straight to the question because you were looking at me as representative of the African Development Bank. But in the bank, I will say they have different approaches for financing innovation. And of recent, taking the case of what's going on in Tunisia after the revolution, in 2011 and 2012, they managed to set up what they call Souk al-Tamir. That is a market for development. And in this market for development, the bank took the lead to contact development partners, took the lead to go to civil societies, go to financial institution, banking institution, and to ask them to set up a fund in order to finance startup initiatives. So it was, at the beginning, it was definitely how to help those young entrepreneurs who have ideas, instead of looking at the phenomenon, we start the revolution in Tunisia because educated young people were really doing nothing but to sell fruits in the street. I say, okay, if you have ideas to set up a business, here they have managed to raise about €1 million to really give it for those who have the kind of ideas. So it starts from there, and the scheme is working very well. But you said something which really I consider is very important. How to make possibility for the countries to set up startup innovation funds, could I say, startup funds. I believe if we have the approach of financing formation, apprentissage, the tax we are levying in order to train people, we can consider the kind of approach to have maybe 1% of whatever to be set up aside in order to set up innovation funds and to support young entrepreneurs. The experience has proven that if you finance, say, 10 startups like this, 8 or 9 may fail. As our friend from Singapore said, maybe the one which will succeed will make enough money to really offset, compensate the 9 which have been lost funding. So again, we have to see our countries, the policy makers, that when we raise funds like this, there are some fundamental research which could be at the benefit of the nation. And we have to facilitate also for businesses who are making research and development in their different enterprises, to give incentive in order to not to tax this, to make this reserve not taxable, and even to encourage them to have within their respective industry research and development.
Can I just maybe expand on that? Because it's a question the gentleman over there was asking. How do you match private and public money in order to finance innovation? And maybe I can ask very specifically, in your experience at the bank and Afrexim Bank and in your experience, does private money really run and rush into the space where public money has been put to finance innovation? Or do they just sort of wait and see and are not very responsive?
No,
what is the experience?
I think we have to take this as a collective challenge. And to answer to that, we can provide a kind of co-financing. You have the angel investors, you have the institutions like the banks or ADB, the DFIs, to co-finance schemes with the private sector. But considering this time, not the DFCs taking the lead. It has to be private sector driven initiative. And we have in every institution like this, we have funds which can be called technical assistance, we can be, let's say, grant, in order to work with them, with the private sector themselves to take it up. So that's the way I will say it.
Thank you. Peng.
I'd like to follow on some of your thoughts there. First, and Wally and I had a conversation along these lines too earlier. Not all innovative products come from research. So, and the opposite, funding research does not guarantee economic impact. But if you want to fund research, then I think we've seen this a lot in Singapore. We spend a lot of money in research, and not a lot of it doesn't translate into economic impact. So what we're realizing is that you need to actually focus on the stages after research, right? In terms of translation, in terms of go-to-market, in terms of all the VC community, the startup community. In fact, I would go as far as to argue if you don't have an effective startup ecosystem, your research is not going to translate. It's as simple as that.
So you need lots of startups in order for your research to be adopted and adapted into products.
Yes.
That's what you're saying.
That's my belief. If you look at Stanford and why it's one of the world's greatest creators of ideas into industry is because Silicon Valley is right there. Right? And the function of government, I agree with you, is actually not to be the private sector, but to turbocharge the private sector, right? To work with the private sector to make sure that it happens. And one point of note I always like to emphasize is a venture capital, a VC, is actually a service person. He services the startup community. So the person with the money is not the boss. The person with the money actually services the people that will make money for him, right? So to that extent, if you've got a good entrepreneurial ecosystem, the money comes. Again, Lagos is an example I like to use in Africa. Right? There are probably 3 or 4 different VCs from elsewhere, and locally they are being formed. There are angel groups being formed. So people are seeing startups that can make money, so they come and they invest. Now, the risk is higher. Some of them are there because of maybe personal reasons, and that's where the government can step in and turbocharge that industry. So that's sort of my general thought on the sort of life cycle of funding. Money is smart in a lot of ways, right? And if you've got ideas that will make money, money will chase after you.
There was a question, Peng, I don't know if you finished on that point, but the other question he asked is, what is the content of this knowledge economy that you're talking about?
I have it right here. And so if you look at how people create value in economies, first of all, you have natural resource. You dig things out of the ground and you sell them. And then you have manufacturing. You take things from the ground, you put them together into different products, and you sell that. So you add value. And then another direction you could go in is the service economy, where you sell your hours for time. You sell your time for money.
For money.
Right? So, for example, Philippines' BPO business is the second biggest chunk of their GDP, business process outsourcing business. It's a totally services business. They run all kinds of things for the rest of the world. And that's one way to make a living. Now the services industry starts to approach the knowledge economy, because it's not using natural resources, it's not using what you have in the ground to create value. It's using your brains or your time to create value. That starts to move into the knowledge economy, and sort of at the one extreme of the economy, the knowledge economy, is just to use ideas to create money, right? The people who write those games, right? It's basically pure ideas that they put into computer code. They put it on the cloud, and people pay them money to play the games. And that's just one example of the many, many ways you can do it using ideas. So Paul Romer, who's an economist, I think he's in New York U now. He used to be at Stanford. He postulates that he's one of the top young economists in the world. He postulates that almost all value that is created in economies actually comes from ideas and not things, bits, not atoms. Right? So that's why it's important to think of economic development in terms of knowledge-based economies, because that's where ultimately the cheapest ideas and the most profitable ideas are created.
Thank you. I don't know if you've noticed, but just very quickly, and then I'll come to your questions. There's a debate brewing here, but they're being very polite with one another. You say you need a startup ecosystem in order for research to get traction. Dr. Paul is saying you need to invest in research before you can get innovation. The two of you can fight it out over lunch, okay? Yes, sir. I had a question over there. I'm seeing a madam over here. I'm going to privilege the ladies. And there's a lady waving her hand very furiously at the back there. Is that correct? Yeah? We'll start with you, since you're so energetic. And then we'll come to you, madam, and then to you, sir. I'm reversing the order. Oh, there's another one over here. We'll have, if you don't mind, we'll take 4 or 5 questions this time, if you promise to keep them short. Okay? All right, so we'll start with the lady over there who stood up in the white. And then we'll come to you. You third, you fourth.